Hey Kim, here's your knife sharpening set. I'm going to try and do a quick demo so you can figure out how to use it. And hopefully when we talk on the phone it'll be easier to ask questions and I can explain things better that way. So there are a couple things. There are two stones. This one with the ridges in it is used to flatten the actual sharpening stone. So you don't actually sharpen a knife on this one, but you do need to soak this one before you use it. So I have a pan of water. I'm just going to go ahead and set that in there, and we'll just leave that alone until we're ready for it. This stone is the actual sharpening stone. Now, this is a type of clay that will disintegrate if it's soaked for too long. So while we want to keep it wet when we're using it, you don't want to leave it in water long term like the other one. To get it started though, we can dunk it for a few minutes. So I'll just set it in there for the moment. This black rubberized thing is just a stone holder. It'll hold the sharpening stone so it doesn't move around as we're using it. And it's set up for a variety of sizes. The squirt bottle is just to keep the stone wet, so as the swarf and bits of steel, parts of the stone come off, it'll sort of form a slurry and wash away, and just so the stone works better. The Sharpie is used to help figure out the edge of your knife, so you can make sure you're sharpening at the right angle for the knife. So, to start out, we'll actually take the Sharpie and just mark the edge of the knife you're going to sharpen. So we get a black line right along there. And I'll go ahead and do this on both sides for now. Could just do one to start, but why not? And the first time you do this, you might want to make a thicker line. We'll go ahead and do a little thicker line, so it might be easier to demo the scratch patterns. And the main thing here is you just want it to be solid. So the reason we do that is because the pattern where that ink is scratched off on the first couple passes will tell us whether we're holding it too sharp or too shallow. So if you think about a knife, about the edge of a knife looking sort of like this. So imagine we're looking at like super close up at a knife just like this. There are sort of two bevels. So this bigger, longer bevel is just the knife itself from sort of spine towards the edge. So there's a bit of a taper there. The actual cutting edge is this sharper bevel right at the corner, or at the tip rather. So if you think about the stone, we'll be rubbing a stone along that edge, cutting edge, and our goal is to match that angle. So when we match that angle, we'll scrape off a clean stripe, basically all the way from the point to that corner. The marker helps show where that's happened, so we can see the shiny metal in contrast to the remaining black marker much more easily. And if this pen is the stone, if the stone is at an angle like that instead of like that, then we'll get a shiny spot here, black here, and black here, because we're only rubbing on that corner point. If we're too steep for angled this way, then we'll only see a scratch here and it won't be the full width of that. It's a little bit harder to tell, but you can usually see sort of a difference in thickness of that line. Okay. Hopefully this will be clear once I actually scratch this knife. So that's plenty long enough with that sharpening stone in the water. Just put it into the holder, cinch down the little clamps. Make sure it's still got some water on the surface. And we'll take a first pass. So the instructor that I learned from actually had us sharpen towards us. So we'll start out by just I'll show you the motion one-handed. So we start out something like this. Oops, my arm is in the way. Okay, so I'll start out at a slight angle here. Sometimes you can feel the cutting edge. Get this to focus a little better. And I'm just going to drag it along the stone, and as it starts to taper, I'll lift my hand up a little bit to account for the change in slope. And that didn't do much, so I'm going to go ahead and use both hands. And I'm just putting enough pressure that my skin under my fingernails just starts to turn a little bit white. You can actually go back and forwards. Doesn't have to be one direction. And try to hold that angle stable. And now we'll take a look. And I don't know if I get this to focus well. Let's see if I can see the line. Unfortunately, this camera does not have a manual focus ring, and the autofocus in video is not working well. Let's see if I get a different background. I don't think you're able to see that. Alright, I'll try to illustrate it on paper instead in a second here. So I think you can see that the stone is starting to dry out a little bit though. So just going to spritz that down, spread the water a little more evenly. And I need to move things around so I have enough arm room. So a lot of this comes down to just feeling the edge as you bring the knife back and forth on the stone. And you can do a section, like work on the heel a bunch, and then move over and work another section, and you just want to overlap the sections and try to treat them more or less evenly. And as you get to a more steeply curved section, and make sure to lift that wrist a little bit, and periodically check and see if you're getting at a good angle. I think I'm actually not at a very good angle for this. I think I'm way too steep. So I'm going to go ahead and change that angle and move a little bit faster here to try and get that to show up sooner. might be able to see a little bit of that. There's sort of a probably like a blurry light line in the video, the top of the ink mark. It's only about a 32nd of an inch wide, if that. It's a little hard to see, but when you're doing this yourself, it's not that hard. You'll be able to see the shiny spot. So the next big question is, how long do you do this? So how many strokes, or how long do you need to work one side before you switch to the other? And there isn't a hard and fast answer to that, not at least in terms of number of strokes or duration. What you want to do is check periodically on the opposite side. So this is the side that's been against the stone. So the other side I'll feel from the spine towards the edge, and I'm feeling for a little burr. So as we sharpen, go back to my sketch here. So if this is our edge, and we're running the stone back and forth along here, we're going to be gradually making a little bit of a burr that points in that direction. So obviously that's exaggerated. As soon as we feel that burr and it's consistent the whole length, then we want to switch and start working on this side. So as we're doing that, that will push that burr over and sort of fold that piece of metal back and forth a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of a burr on a lot of that, but just to be sure. Okay, not much there, but so the heel needs a little bit more. The rest of this feels pretty good. You might be wondering, man, it looks like there's so much of that Sharpie coming out from the stone. A lot of this, well, some of this is definitely going to be Sharpie, but most of it is actually just the steel itself coming off and oxidizing in the water really quickly. So, okay, I've got a little bit of a burr all the way along there. You can go until it's fairly pronounced, and you probably won't be able to see it, but you definitely should be able to feel it. And so as you get more used to how it feels, then you'll notice it sooner. And one, this process gets faster because you don't have to sharpen as much to create such a large burr. But also you'll wear the knives down slower, so the knives will last longer. Okay, so once we have a burr, we just switch sides. And you could do this, continue to work right-handed and just switch and push away from you, or point edge away from you. The guy we learned from suggested just getting used to doing this left-handed because it's going to feel weird anyway. That seems to work well for me. So it's the same process. So sort of back and forth, raising your arm to account for the curvature. And note the knife I'm using doesn't have a whole lot of curve, so I'm not raising my arm very much. I mean, it may be hard to see, so you might need to go quite steep for some knives, like a chef's knife, or if you have something with a really exaggerated curve. And then this side, the second side, doesn't usually take as long, also, which is another, one good reason to use your offhand for it. The other thing about using both your right and left hand to do it this way is that this actual stone will wear more evenly than if you're just doing it all from one side. Even if you make an effort to use the entire stone, you'll invariably wear it more evenly. Alright, so now I've got a little bit of a burr on the other side, and I think this side, you can probably see that smooth section a little bit better. So that's the basic sharpening part. Now we need to strop it. So I'm going to do that right-handed, move you back over to the other side. So we start out stropping it on the same stone that we sharpened on, but this is where you can either move on to after stropping it on this stone, then you can move on to a leather strop or a finer grit stone or all kinds of things. But this one stone will do a pretty good job for all we need. So to strop, you're only going backwards, so always moving the spine. The spine is always pointed in the direction of motion. And again, you have your offhand on the blade, but just to hold it on there. So this is just a real gentle, slow, backwards process. Do one side, and then just turn it over in your dominant hand. Do the other side. Flip it back again. It's just back and forth, very slowly. And you just want to make sure that you're just running along that edge. We're just pushing that burr back and forth and back and forth each time we run over the stone. It's like bending a paper clip back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just waiting to weaken that joint enough that the burr falls off, and then you'll be left with a really sharp edge. So you can do that 8 or 10 times, and then feel from both sides. And that burr that we were feeling for before to determine when we were done should be gone on both sides the entire length of the knife when you finish with the stropping process. I'm almost there now, a little bit left on the heel, but in this case I'm going to continue to strop the whole knife and just do it very gently and spend a little bit more time working the heel than I do the rest of the blade. Okay, you can also sometimes see, if you hold it up to a light, sometimes the burr will show up as just a little bit of a fuzziness at the edge. And that's about it. And if I did this right in a little while, yeah, we should be able to slice things pretty cleanly. Then once you're done, you can do a couple knives. Then take this other stone, the flattening stone, and just run that back and forth all the way across the sharpening stone a couple times. And every once in a while, I'm just going to run it along the corners just to keep from making those corners too sharp because they might chip. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll see if I can sharpen one more knife. And just do that quickly without any commentary, so you can get a better idea for how this can go. Of course, my Sharpie is dried out now. Okay. Good. One side done. You can see maybe not. I have to get my other camera to take some better pictures of this at some point. Alright, the second side's done. Now we're just dropping. That feels pretty good. Scrap paper. Maybe not. Alright, that's better. This piece of paper got a little bit wet. Alright. That's all there is to it.